All right, welcome everybody. My name is Ryan Killay. I'm the Director of Admissions at William Peace University. Joined tonight by Deniesha Newby, who is the Director of Financial Aid at William Peace. Um, we're going to be bringing this webinar, how to navigate completing the FAFSA and aid applications. But we're just going to give a little bit more time to let people enter before beginning the presentation. So just give us a moment and yeah, we'll get started soon. Okay.
Hello. They say look for party to join. Okay.
All right. In the interest of everybody's time, I think Denisha, it'll be good to get going right now because it is 6:01. So yeah, if you want to take it away, I will ask if you can please put your last name on your name. That way, I'm able to check you in. Just so we have record of who came. This will be recorded. It is in progress, and we are going to turn off the recording before we answer questions. And that way, if there's any sensitive questions, it won't be in the recording. But yeah, if there's any questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll be here answering those questions. But yeah, I'll kick it over to Denisha.
All right. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. And as Ryan said, my name is Deniesha Newby. I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at William Peace University. I've been in financial aid for about 25 years. So I've sat in many of your shoes. I was a student who used financial aid. I was a parent who has a college graduate who went through that process, and as an administrator. So hopefully some of these things that I've gathered will help you with the process. And again, at the end, we'll give you some resources about contacting us. And certainly can put any questions that you have in the chat. So hopefully we'll just talk a bit about the FAFSA application, that process, what that looks like, and some other things that you can be doing now and in the future to work with your student to make this a successful event. All right, I like to start off with what exactly is financial aid. So really, financial aid is any resource that you use to help pay for college. So again, it could be scholarships, it could be grants. We're going to go over those different types of things. And it's up to the Office of Financial Aid and the financial aid administrators to try to gather as much from different sources that we can to kind of meet that cost of attendance or cost of education. So we have to calculate that. There's limits. We have some federal guidelines, of course, about how much families can have. So we have to collect that information. And how we use that information, so whatever the student receives, is used in their cost of attendance or cost of education. So these are terms that you're going to hear throughout this process for you and your student. So a cost of attendance, every institution that you're looking at has to give you an estimation of their cost. So what students report or what they have found for an academic year, what you can expect the estimated cost is. It's an average generally, so sometimes you have some choices in there. So tuition and fees, that's the actual class costs and maybe any course fees or whatever, housing and food that could be on campus, off campus, that could be a commuter, that type of thing, books and course materials. So that could be whatever, your charge, or could be, let's say you're in a science, you need a kit or whatever. It could be those types of things. Transportation, that could be a parking pass. That could be also, let's say if you're a little further away, it could be that transportation going home over breaks and holidays, and miscellaneous personal. So that's like laundry detergent, those types of things a student would need, right, in order to survive for a year, right? And so every institution has to come up with those numbers. That doesn't mean you're billed those numbers, but so that you can compare apples to apples when looking at different institutions, what target should we be trying to hit? So you're going to hear cost of education, cost of attendance from different institutions, and know how that is broken up. So that's an important thing to kind of know. Of course, your cost of attendance, your personal cost of attendance might be a little less, a little bit more. But again, this is just a ballpark to kind of help you. And all this information is used to really help build the financial aid package each year. So on top of that, another term that you probably have heard a lot is the SAI, or the Student Aid Index. And this number is calculated by the federal government when you do the FAFSA form. And there's two different components. There's a student component and a parent component, which comes up with the SAI. The reason that this is important, and not necessarily to know your number, but just to know how the figures come about, is this number again helps financial aid institutions, scholarship entities, the federal government, compare your family apples to apples to other family. And we'll go into what those questions are and kind of how that number is derived in a way. But how that is used at many institutions, including Peace, is we look at the cost of attendance. So whatever we estimate minus that student aid index gives us financial need. And that's what determines, let's say, the federal Pell Grant, certain need-based grants from institutions. And so when you're comparing, at the end, we'll talk about comparing, it's good to know what is need-based and what isn't, and how these different institutions might have different numbers based on their difference of the cost of attendance, but your student aid index should be consistent across organizations, right? So again, I'm just kind of giving you some background of some of the things, and we call it the Federal Student Aid Alphabet Index, right? Because we have all these acronyms that we use, but so you know where they're actually coming from. When we're looking at need, there's different categories of financial aid. So some grants are need-based, and some are not. So some of your merit awards, such as your presidential scholarship or whatever that you receive from us upon admissions, is not considered need-based. So we have to calculate that, and making sure that we're not over the federal need amount when we're calculating your package. So again, that might make a difference as well as you're comparing different offer letters. And there's times where, some of the information isn't correct, and we'll talk about how you can correct that later. When you're looking at different types of aid, there are 4 major components of aid. What we're probably going to focus on a bit today, and what you have a bit more control over, is how to apply for different outside scholarships and institutional scholarships, and federal grants, and we'll kind of talk about that. So again, the nice thing on the gift aid is that's money that you and your student do not have to pay back. So of course, we want that to be the biggest part of the pie, right? And then you will also possibly offer federal student loans in the student's name, and sometimes work opportunities through the federal work study program. So again, those are the major 4 types of aid. So if you're getting, sometimes you'll get something from your work or an outside entity. Most of the time that's a scholarship or a grant. The state of North Carolina has state loans or federal loans. So those are the But these are the 4 major parts and types of aid that you're going to see when you start to get your students' offers letters in the mail. So what are the sources that these aid programs can come from? So the major sources are the federal government, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a couple slides. Your state of residency also has a component at times that they can offer to you. Of course, the institution, again, upon admission, upon other applications, they offer different aid programs. Your employer, so that's not only the student's employer, but the parent employers. I've even seen grandparent employers at times offer aid programs, or maybe you work for another institution and you get tuition exchange, or there is some type of tuition reimbursement or that type of thing. And then, of course, private sources, and we'll go over a few of those as well. So think about organizations, think about places of worship. So those are the private sources. So these are the major places that families look at to look for different aid components. When we talk about the federal government, they are honestly one of the largest sources of individual sources that students receive aid. So they basically cover all 4 of those segments, right? So they do have some scholarship programs, they have grant programs, they have loan programs, and they also help to administer the federal work study program. The major thing about that federal government one is generally you have to do the FAFSA form, and we'll talk about that in a couple slides, each and every year. And I suggest you do it every single year. Even if you don't tap into it every year, it's better to have it on file and have it and not need it versus need it and not have it. So a lot of my families, I say, do the FAFSA form each year. We'll see what the results are, and you can then choose if you're going to tap into any of those sources. And we'll talk about the components that you will have to have on that as well. When we're talking about federal aid, and I've talked about a few of these, of course, they have the work programs, they have different grants, and then it does sometimes open up different scholarship opportunities as well. The big thing about the federal aid programs is most of them, by doing the FAFSA form and completing certain questions on there, you're applying for everything. You don't have to check certain boxes. You don't have to do generally additional applications, and different schools will help you with that process. So your state as well, because on the FAFSA form, they ask both the student state of residency and the contributor or parent state of residency, and that would determine possibly, along with the other SAI information, if you're eligible for state-based awards. Again, while there's many different deadlines, if you do the FAFSA form as early as possible, so very close to when it actually comes out, then most likely you're going to meet that deadline of that state. So every state is different. Some of them are rolling. It just really depends. So again, by you putting the residency information on there, they look at the SAI, they look at the income, whatever their requirements are, and then they determine it, and then they send that information to the school. So as I stated, the colleges and universities also use the FAFSA information along with other things, right, to determine types of aid programs that you're eligible for, including William P. So again, you ask, you do the FAFSA form, you put us on there, we couple that with the merit information, and then again, we try to come up with that financial aid package. So your institutions, and there's sometimes you do have to do additional applications. So for instance, if your student was interested in honors, there is another application for that. But many of them, by doing that FAFSA form, that's the biggest application, but different institutions, and we would tell you, hey, this is what you're interested in. There is a different supplemental application on top of the FAFSA if that is the case. And private sources. So hopefully, I hear different things. Actually, I was just invited to come to a high school in a couple weeks. So hopefully you have a high school guidance counselor or a college career counselor who's going to help possibly with some of these opportunities for outside sources. So think about places within your community. So again, whether it's a place of worship, maybe it's a charitable organization, maybe it's a Masonic organization or fraternal organization, and you don't necessarily have to be a member of some of these organizations because that's how they tend to give back to the community. So definitely kind of take a look around. Hopefully your your school district or whatever has some type of website. And I will also give you a website if you're a resident of North Carolina. There's a North Carolina Foundation. So there are opportunities for outside scholarships. And they're not just for necessarily high school seniors. So that is a time that a lot of them do come out, but there's some that want you to be further in your college career. Like when my son was in college, he applied for a scholarship that they wanted him to be a junior in college because they wanted him to be a bit closer to graduation. We just got a scholarship opportunity from one of our board members here at Peace. And again, it's for junior or senior. And so sometimes families or organizations know, okay, sometimes when you start, it's fine, but trying to getting over that end stretch, we want to help those students complete. So again, you might find different scholarships at different times. So I say this is something that you continuously work for. And I also tell families and students to talk to people around you. Maybe someone can't write the check, but they can be a person to kind of help you look for scholarships. They can look at the local board in the Panera and see that there's a scholarship and take a picture and send it to your family. So thinking about that, definitely deadlines are key with those. And I personally feel that you shouldn't pay for any scholarship searches or applications, but again, that's your own choice in it. Just kind of be careful with anything that you are applying for, kind of making sure they're reputable. That's why I really love the ones that maybe come through institutions like us or come through your high school's information or guidance area. So thinking about employers, and we talked a little bit about it. So again, not only the student's employer, but the parents or grandparents' employer might have different opportunities, so maybe you retired from someplace. We have students and families who are part of different organizations and they get tuition benefits and things of that nature. Again, even let's say, I think one of the questions we got written in about was about tuition exchange. Again, that's because a parent works possibly at another institution that is involved in a tuition exchange. So that's an employer benefit. So again, finding out and I would say go to your HR area. Say, hey, do you have any benefits? That my student can apply for? Are there scholarship opportunities? Are there forgivable loans? Are there what are some of the benefits? Because I think a lot of people don't tap into some of those benefits because they just don't know how it works. So again, talking to your HR, talking to people maybe in your circle who have similar circumstances, maybe they have children in college, maybe your best friend, they went to school last year, kind of ask them some questions. Where did you get scholarships from? Can you give me some leads? Are there some websites that I can go to find some of those scholarship opportunities? Okay, let's dive into the FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid. As you are preparing for completing this form, if you haven't already, basically, hopefully with the FAFSA simplification project that's been happening for the past 3 or 4 years, hopefully it's gotten a little bit better. Even if you've done it years ago or this is your first time, really they try to ask you the least amount of questions to get the information. So they're trying not to ask questions that you've already answered or that isn't appropriate to your situation. So everyone doesn't get exactly the same questions. It basically collects demographic information, financial information, and then, like I said, it calculates that SAI so that it's sent to different institutions that you actually list on there. They do have assistance in multiple languages if that's something that you need assistance for. And usually there's free programs around maybe bigger institutions, or again, your high school might have FAFSA help days and things of that nature. So there's usually organizations that will help you as well. There is a 1-800 number to ask questions if you have it. And of course, many financial aid administrators can also assist you if you have a question about specific questions. When you are preparing to complete the FAFSA form, each contributor, each person who has a part to complete has to apply for and obtain what's called the Federal Student Aid ID. It's basically your electronic signature. So not only the student needs their own, but the parent also needs their own. In some cases, both parents, but we'll kind of get into the parent information in a moment. So basically, again, it's tied to your social security number. You need to go on to studentaid.gov and actually create that account. Generally, you need that FSA ID before you start that application. And hold on to this because you will use this year after year after year. And even, let's say, students have certain programs that they're eligible for after graduation, you would still keep that same FSA ID. So me personally, I have mine in a note on my phone. I have my son still, but I have that on my phone. When you're creating it, you're going to not only put your social security information in there, you're also going to create like a forgot backup. Basically, you're going to put PIN number in there. They're going to ask you for an email account and a cell phone number, send you a text. So let's say you change jobs or change email accounts. There's different ways in case you do forget, you can reactivate that. And again, it's tied to your social security number. So just like you can't get another social security number generally, you can't get another FSA ID. So that is tied to that particular one person. Families can't share it and have a family one. Each individual student needs to have their own, and the parent needs to have their own. So I do like to kind of go over slightly because there are certain situations where there's multiple parents, and the question is, who is the parent that should go on the FAFSA form? So if the student's biological or adoptive parent, so no grandparents, no guardians, unless you legally adopted, should go on the FAFSA form. So no grandparents, no aunt, no family friends. It's the biological or adoptive parents. On the FAFSA form, if the parents are married to each other, then they both go on that FAFSA form. If the parents live together and are not married, again, they both go on the FAFSA form. If the parents are divorced, separated, or were never married, then and don't live together, then you would need to choose or figure out who's the parent that provided the most support or will provide the most support during those 12 months or so that academic year of the student. So let's say families are saying, well, they kind of go back and forth. So you can say, okay, who pays for the health insurance? Who pays for the cell phone bill? That type of thing. So again, and that is the parent who should be on the FAFSA form. Let's say that parent is remarried. Then it's that parent and that parent's family or household should be on that. So it could be that parent and their new spouse and those children and that student. So I know that gets a little confusing sometimes for people. So if you have questions, again, we can kind of go over it at the end. I give you my contact information. We can kind of go through that. And then the FAFSA also kind of helps you with that a little bit. But just again, if you think about it, needs to be biological or adoptive parent. And if the parents are never been married, divorced, or separated, who is the parent who provides the most support? We know the student possibly is going to college, so they're not going to be in possibly anyone's household. Where would they come back for breaks? Again, who's carrying them on health insurance? Who covers a car insurance, a cell phone? Those are kind of things that you can kind of help yourself to kind of figure out who should be on that FAFSA form. So when you are ready to do the FAFSA form and fill it out, you're going to go to studentaid.gov, and this is a screenshot of kind of the homepage of that FAFSA form. One thing I will say and suggest, and I think I say this later on too, is making sure that you are completing the correct FAFSA for when your student is attending. So right now, there's 2 different FAFSAs out there because we have current students who are starting, and Ryan's working with them for spring semester and summer semester, which uses our previous 25-26 FAFSA form. If your student is starting in the fall of 26, they are going to do the 26-27 FAFSA form. So thinking about what year your student is actually attending, and that's the year that you need to do the FAFSA form for. And so just kind of, because we do have a couple cases, unfortunately, we're looking feverishly for a FAFSA form, and it was the previous year. Now, I will say, if you look at this screenshot, they tried to put the new FAFSA on top and then the old FAFSA kind of in small letters. So it wasn't that way before, but we still get that confused. People say, oh, I wanted to do it for now. And they end up possibly completing the incorrect FAFSA form. And unfortunately, it doesn't link up. The tax information is different, you know, because technically, while we kind of know when they're starting, we have it all over the place. So sometimes that's a little bit harder to figure out. When you get your confirmation page, and at the top of the FAFSA form, it's going to say which year it is. And so try to keep an eye out on that. And if you're not sure, definitely ask, and we will always confirm that for you. So when you go into that FAFSA form, they're going to ask you who is it. So basically, the student can start it or the parent can start it. I always suggest the student starting it. There's been a couple of hiccups in certain things, but it's best if the student starts it. You know, again, when your student first applies for the FSA ID, making sure that you have the correct Social Security number, the correct name. Maybe, you know, you call them Susie for years, but their name is Suzanne, because it has to line up with the Social Security Administration, or it's going to lock up and never go anywhere. So again, sometimes I say, pull out that Social Security card, pull out those documents, because we have had cases where the numbers were transversed. Maybe that was, you know, Susie's brother, Johnny, you know, and the numbers were so similar, they put the wrong number on and it couldn't match it. So again, this is the one time, pull out those actual documents and let's take a look at it, and making sure that you're inputting that information in correctly. So I do.
And Deniesha, we had an instance just this past summer where me and you were on the phone with the student, and you know, to confirm, and he's like, no, this is my Social Security number. And then he finally got his card and was like, okay, it's actually this.
So it does very much happen. And, you know, I've had even, lots of things having to go to Social Security Administration. I mean, there's a lot. So again, take out that card, making sure, like, okay, this is correct. And then they say, is this correct? And unfortunately, as you go through the process after it, it hides the number. So you can't, so really, when you're putting it in that first time, you really have to make sure the number is correct as you can. I mean, things happen, life happens, we're rushing, sometimes we're on our phone and it's smaller. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought I hit a 2 and I hit a 3, you know, but really try to make sure and double check, and not just say, no, I know it's right. Because that's one of the hardest things, to be honest, sometimes to correct. And that's one of the most frustrating things. So again, I highly suggest the student actually starts the form and they put in their FSA ID. They also, then there's information, like a video out there about how to invite the contributor. But it's, you know, they kind of walk you through it. A nice thing I do feel like is, if there are questions, almost on every single page, you're going to see some type of hyperlink that'll give you more information. So, and the other thing that they've tried to improve within the last few years is that then the student can, and you as a parent can actually bring your information directly from the IRS. And the nice thing about that exchange is that you're not actually seeing the numbers on there. So for privacy and things of that nature, when you're doing your individual parts, it's grabbing that information and putting it in, so that your federal tax information is secure. You know, let's say you're at a library or at work, whatever, they can't look over your shoulder and see your income and all that stuff, because it just transfers it. It asks you for information like your address or whatever, and then it transfers it. So that's kind of really good and helpful. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I don't know the difference between my AGI and taxes paid. That's all going to go in there automatically. So it eliminates, to be honest, there's been times back in the day that people put an extra 0 in there. That makes a big difference, right? So at times, so this eliminates that. And it also adds more security, not only for parents, but for everyone, because some parents did feel not necessarily at ease that their student had access to their information. So when your student gets their summary, they're not going to see your numbers, and vice versa. So again, when the student starts it, they're going to be putting their identity information in. They're going to consent to transfer the information, asking them their marital status, their college plans, what schools. They can put like 20 different schools on there at the same time. And if they have personal or unusual circumstances, because there are some cases where students don't have parent information to put on there. So it lets them identify that. And we'll go over that in a couple of slides. So I do like to kind of go through this a little bit, because some families are like, well, they're kind of on their own. They're 18 now. I don't want to put my information in there. Well, unfortunately, the way the federal government looks at it is that in order for a student to be considered independent, basically they have to be about over the age of 24. So there's a question on the FAFSA form. Well, once you put your data in, they see if you were born before or after. For this year is 2002, right? So if the student was basically 24, married, are in a graduate or professional program, active duty military, a veteran, they have children or legal dependents, they're an orphan, a ward of the court, or in foster care, an emancipated minor or under legal guardianship, or homeless and self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. So I will say for all of those things, if it's not by age, documentation is requested. So the student can go through that process and say, oh yes, I'm a veteran. We're going to ask for a DD-214. They're going to say, I have children. We're going to look for that information on their tax return, or possibly ask for proof of that. If they're homeless, a lot of times there's a homeless liaison, and we're going to ask for an official letter. So again, we're going to ask for that documentation. It's going to let them go through that process, but we're going to ask for documentation. So in most cases, the students are not independent. Unusual circumstances, we kind of talked about this. So like, again, they'll give them the opportunity to kind of check the box. It'll let them go through it, and it'll let them submit it. And when the school gets that information, so it'll say, okay, because of this, the student can't provide parent support. And then the onus will be up to the school to kind of check for documentation and then proceed with processing that FAFSA form. If you have questions about that, definitely have an individual conversation. And sometimes I'll say this, sometimes it's not your family, but maybe your student's best friend, right? And I'm not going to do the FAFSA form because I don't have it. Again, encourage them to talk to the financial aid office, because we really want to help them get through it and work through the best way possible. And like I said, no one else should be on that FAFSA form but a biological or adoptive parent. So again, we've talked about the information it's gonna collect on the FAFSA form, some of that demographic. It's asked about citizenship information, parent educational status. That's really for statistical purposes. There are certain grants sometimes that ask about that. Again, so that's really not in the initial eligibility. And they're asked about high school information as well. So it's kind of just check boxes going through that. Again, they will elect to have, if they worked in that year that they're asking for, elect that information from the IRS. And they'll also ask about asset information, because again, sometimes that's not always very clear on the tax return. So it'll ask about, your business and or, your current assets. So again, if you have questions about that, the nice thing is every single question has that little I next to it, where if you need more information, you can look at a deeper definition. And then they also ask information about which colleges they want to send the FAFSA to. I would say send it to every college, even though we only want Peace on there, but go ahead and send it to every college that, even if the student hasn't applied, right? We're thinking of applying. It's the local institution. Not that they will process it, but at least that would save you steps in case something changes, right? So and it's easy to add schools after as well, but just sometimes if you're thinking about it, so don't let the fact that you haven't finished your admissions application with us and you're doing the FAFSA form to go ahead and put us in any institution on there, okay? And then this is the same time they'll say, hey, who do you want to contribute and what is their information? It's going to ask for the parent's ID, email address, and it's also going to come with an invitation code. So that student can screenshot it to you, and then either you can respond to the link that the parent gets, or when you logged into FAFSA form, you'll see it says you have an invitation code, put that in here, and it'll let you go and do the parent part of that FAFSA form. So again, like I said, the parent can put in, the student can put in the parent's email account, and that code will pop up. So there's multiple ways, and this is a process improvement because the first year it was just by email, and sometimes emails go to junk, spam, students type in the wrong email, or that's your old email, that type of thing. So it's nice that they have this code here that they can copy and get for you. So the parent sees it, accepts the invitation, logs in. Hopefully they already have their FSA ID. They log in. They basically go through all those other steps that the student did, putting your identity information in there, consent to transfer the information from the IRS, putting that marital status in there, figuring out who's in your household, as we kind of just talked about, your state of residency. You're going to put all that information in there. Also, it's going to look at that IRS information for family size and things of that nature. You're going to also put in there. So again, even if you have other children in college and they're not in your household technically, if they're under 24, you would include them in college, okay, in your household because they're away at college, right? Your asset information and things of that nature. Okay, so again, and I guess I just said this, let's say for students who are dependent. So I think that's most of our students on here. When they ask about family size, it's the student. So a lot of times the question is, other than the student, who is in your household, right? So they're going to ask the parent, your dependent children, like I said, even if they're away at college, and other people that you might support. So sometimes I was caring for my mother. So at one point in time, my mother was in my household. So I included her in because I supported her. So it looks at that information. And if you have questions about that, again, we can have an offline conversation or talk about it after the recording. The student's going to submit it, your parent's going to do everything, and then the student's going to get, congratulations, the FAFSA is complete. Woo! Yes. Get my time back, right? So again, that's something that the student will get once that parent has done their part and everything is complete. So that's a great thing. So there's a federal processing center that processes that FAFSA. And then that FAFSA is going to be sent, a confirmation basically, and a summary is going to be sent to the student, but it's also going to be sent to the different schools that you have listed on there. Now, and we'll talk a bit about that in a couple of slides as well. So again, it's going to talk about in general, when the student did it, general information, and then the student can also print a summary. One thing that is important, there's times, let's say you're saying, hey, I did it, but I'm not seeing it. Again, looking at what form it was, the date it was, and sometimes this information is helpful to help the school figure out, okay, where's it at? What happened? Why don't we have it yet? So again, kind of keep this information. And again, this is going to go to the student. And so the student should hold on to that information. And I've even seen some scholarships ask for a copy of the FAFSA submission because they want to make sure that you've, used all the options. So again, even for certain scholarships, they'll ask for a copy of this. So what are kind of the next steps? So from here, it's very important, if you have not done the FAFSA form yet for the 26-27 year, start that process. It did come out a little bit before the October 1st release generally. So I think we're back on track. We were off track for a couple of years. So generally every year, so the year before you're actually going to use it, it's going to come out October 1. I highly suggest returning students, current students, new students to kind of do in that October, November time. So you kind of get it done before the holidays, before the, you know, because a lot of schools start processing that information and want to turn it around pretty quickly to families. Again, so you're going to go on studentaid.gov and complete that FAFSA form, get your FSA ID for the parties that need it, not only the student, but the contributors, and complete that FAFSA form. This is also a time to look for outside scholarships. Again, we've kind of talked about that. Like I said, hopefully your guidance counselor is a great resource for you. Think about faith-based organizations that you might be a member of, different merchants that are around. Like I said, if you're a North Carolina resident, the North Carolina Foundation has a lot of resources. If you're not a North Carolina resident, almost every single state has a college foundation. So just look up Arizona College Foundation, and you will see a lot of them are nonprofits or .org, and they have different scholarship searches. And I saw them be a great link. I also seen like College Board. They have a lot of great scholarships out there. So again, kind of looking at what's around you. But again, hopefully, and asking a guidance counselor, hey, I'm looking for scholarships. I'm a little bit short. I don't know exactly what I need, but I'd rather you have more than you need, right? Need it, need it. I don't want you to need it and not have it. I'd rather you have it and not need it, right? So definitely kind of research. This is a great time to do that and to continue to do that. Then from there, once you do the FAFSA form, you list all the schools on there, you apply for admission, because that's what links up the FAFSA to that school. So even though you sent the FAFSA to them, if you've never gone through the process of actually applying for admission and you've been admitted there, many schools won't necessarily import it. So for us, we have a file of not linked FAFSA forms, basically. So we go through that file as people finish their admissions application, they're admitted, we link it together, and the financial aid office then starts to do our work. So then I would find out from that institution that you're looking at what their estimated timeline is. Every school is a bit different, right? So we are hoping to send out offer letters probably right a little bit after the new year or so, but we'll definitely keep you updated on that. And finding out how they're sending out that offer notification. Is it an email? And if it is, it's going to go directly to the student. So again, this is kind of a change, right? We're used to stuff coming to parents and families. It's all the student because it's the student's file, it's the student's information. So if there's an email saying, hey, check your student center, go on, log on. If it's a mail, if it's a letter in the mail, it's going to be addressed to the student. So again, that's something that you might, as you're doing college visits and things like that, ask them, how do you let us know? Is there a portal? What are we, when should we receive that? Having that information so that you can compare institutions to institutions. I would also highly suggest that you use some type of comparison worksheet. So this is from the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators. And if you happen to notice, many of my slides had that same logo because the National Association comes up with this slide deck. I took like 30 slides out, trust me, but they come up with a slide deck to kind of help each year help us to kind of explain the different parts of that FAFSA form. I think a cost comparison worksheet is very helpful because again, when you're looking at the different costs of institutions, looking at it on their own format sometimes is a little bit harder, like, oh, I don't see housing on here, or I see books and supply. So for instance, at Peace, you don't pay for books here. That's included in our tuition. So that's not a number you're going to see. So, knowing that that's a difference, or I know I'm getting this outside scholarship. So again, having that information. So whether you have your own Excel spreadsheet, whether you use a pen and paper, whatever that is, kind of use something to help you be able to compare different offer letters because you're going to get multiple of them. And it can get a bit overwhelming at times. So when you're evaluating it, figure out what is gift aid, right? So what is money you don't have to pay back? Are there requirements for the scholarship? So for instance, your student had a 3.2 coming in. Do they have to keep that 3.2? So if they go down to a 3.1, is that school going to take away that scholarship? So that's something that we do not do. Once the student has that scholarship, as long as they're admissible as a student and stay in good standing, they can keep that scholarship, because we know that there's different pressures that go on when they're here, they're away from home. And so maybe that first or second semester takes them a little bit time to get their sea legs. We're not going to take it away from them. We're going to work with them and keep that. So knowing, is that scholarship renewable, and which ours are for the whole time that they're here, or is this just a first year scholarship? What are the requirements for institutional grants? Do I have to write a thank you letter? Whatever that is, knowing if it's renewable. Are there work opportunities? So knowing, and that's some of the things that you can use to evaluate that offer letter. Also, then, as you're evaluating, you come up with that bottom line. Okay, there's a slight difference. How can I cover that? So again, definitely that's a great time to end all this, having conversations with your student and students having conversations with your parents, because there's many times families will come in my office and they have not had the conversation. They assume that the other party has taken care of everything, and that's not always the case, right? So again, having that conversation, what is the expectation of each family member? Is grandma going to pay for housing, but you have to come up with scholarships for tuition, or we'll split it with you, or we'll do the pay, whatever that is. We expect you to apply for outside scholarships, or we've given you these applications. Did you apply? So having that conversation. Do you have benefits from your employer? Is there a 529 plan you put away for? Are you going to have to take the interest-free student loans or whatever, or the parent loan, or you want the student to do a private loan? Most institutions, including William Peace, have payment plans as well. So we have a 5-month payment plan for each semester. So you can break, so let's say it is $3,000. Again, brought it up by 5. That makes it a little bit easier to, navigate and pursue. Again, having that student maybe save some of the gifts and things that they had or whatever to kind of help them with that. So again, whatever your plan as a family is the correct plan for you. All right, so once you get the offer letter, kind of figure everything out, making sure that you actually activate it and accept whatever you need to accept. Sometimes you might have to write a thank you letter. Sometimes you have to do online counseling, whatever that is. Hopefully that is listed. They usually list it in the portal. Emails, letters are sent to the student of how to activate those different things. I do like to take this quick moment as we come to a close here of just saying that life happens. Things happen, situations change. If there is ever a significant financial change in your situation, whether it's now, whether it's when your student's a senior in college, whenever that is, if something significantly financially changes, loss of employment, let's say, unfortunately, a divorce, sometimes a death of a parent or spouse or something like that, contact the financial aid office and they can help you to let you know what changed. Because when you're doing the FAFSA form, it is usually a year or so back. And sometimes that is way different than the current status, of your finances. Again, have that conversation with the financial aid office. They will give you the forms to fill out, how to document that, and to make the change. Do not try to change it on the FAFSA website, because it's not going to really let you, and it's probably not going to go anywhere. So it's going to kind of frustrate you. So definitely contact the financial aid office, and we can assist you with that information. So with that, I think we're at the question and answer. While you have the recording on real quick, if there are questions, feel free to contact our office. We are a mighty team of 3, but we definitely get back to emails, phones, later on. Probably again after that new year, we'll develop one-on-one consultation times that families can set up one-on-one appointments, and we can talk through your individual offer notification. We're also going to have some videos that go out to you, And then we have some Pacer days as well that we invite families to campus and kind of talk about different scenarios and stuff like that. So with that being said, if we want to end the recording now, and then I don't know if Ryan, you got any questions in the chat.